We're right. G'day listeners and welcome again to the 3 Feet Radio Show. We're doing it via a new bit of technology because unfortunately we can't all be in the studio. And joining me in the studio today is my co-host, Luke Herbert. G'day, Luke.
G'day, Ben, and how are you doing today in the current times we live in, which are somewhat unusual?
I'm doing all right down here in Melbourne, but more importantly, joining us in the studio today is our joining us in the studio today is our special guest all the way over in the West, but I know she's keeping well, in Sue Gaudion. G'day, Sue.
I'm happy to be your co-host, Ben. You can get rid of Luke and even I'll do it.
I don't know about that. He adds a bit of a Kiwi flavour to our show. First of all, just to kick things off here, one of the highlights so far of anyone who loves netball at the moment in isolation has been Gaudy's gas bags. Can you tell us a bit about that and how did that come about?
Gaudy's gas bags. Well, I guess the best way to answer the question is it came about simply because, like a lot of people, courtesy of this COVID pandemic, I've lost all my work. So obviously being 100% involved in sport and Suncorp Super Netball as a commentator, that all has come to a stop for the meantime. My role as a coach with West Coast Fever obviously has paused for the moment. And so, I sort of had to, I guess, generate some enthusiasm and come up, I guess, just to keep me occupied and busy. So Shelley O'Donnell, who's a really good mate, used to play for Australia. I hadn't spoken with her for a while and we kind of said, let's catch up on Zoom because everybody seemed to be doing it. And I said, why don't we record it and we'll throw it out on social media and see what people think. And I just called it Gaudy's Gas Bags. And that first episode had such a good response. And so, as things do, it just kept going. And so, I don't know, 20-something episodes later, 24 or 25 episodes later, it's crazy.
And just for the viewer that hasn't tuned in yet, tell us briefly about Kiwi Week and the time that people can tune in and how to this excellent program that I've enjoyed watching.
Luke, so I decided after doing, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks with our Aussie stars from yesteryear that we might delve into Kiwi Week and coming up, the whole week. I usually only do the 5 episodes, but we're doing a full 7 and we started off with Dame Nolene Tarua and we headed over to Donna Wilkins on to Yvonne Willering, Temepara Bailey, and tonight we're going with Laura Langman. There's still 2 guests to come this weekend. So people can go to YouTube and watch on Gaudy's Gas Bags. They stream at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, so 10 p.m. for our Kiwis, which is a little bit late, but otherwise they can head to the Facebook page. But either way, the videos are loaded and people can watch them at any time in their own time, which I think has been one of the best things.
Tell me, Sue, if the Suncorp Super Netball League and the ANZ Premiership across the ditch do return, can you see a hub system being used like the AFL are proposing?
Yeah, good question, Ben. To be honest with you, I hope not. I actually hope that if we do get Suncorp Super Netball or the ANZ starts back, that we're in a position to be able to actually see the season out. I know I can speak specifically for the SSN that the variety of possibilities that have been spoken about or I guess a calendar has been put in place that we could look at starting our Suncorp Super Netball League in its normal week-by-week capacity by around about mid-August, I think, and then have a grand final the last week leading into Christmas. I'd rather sit and wait and be patient and hope that we could do that. And at worst case scenario, go into a hub system post that. I think that's in our best position. And netball came out right from I think netball's been really clever through this. We came out with a date right from the get-go that said no games would be played before the end of June, but that they would revisit something at the end of May, which would allow us the possibility to be on a court in July, and that allowed teams a 4-week training block leading into that. But that's our best case scenario, but we've got a lot of leeway to still get a season away. And the way in which Australia and both New Zealand are responding to COVID and the way that we're, our governments are, slowly but surely, allowing us to do things within the community, I'm starting to feel really confident that both leagues will find a way in season 2020.
Just as a sort of logical follow-up question, and Ben and I kind of touched upon this a bit off air when we were talking, but do you think there's also an argument purely on financial grounds to hold, say, the Suncorp Live in the hubs, particularly since you're probably not going to have crowds at the game? So, like, I'm born in Perth, so I obviously love the place, but purely if I'm a number cruncher, the people that everybody take the number crunching bureaucrat mindset, I'm going to do the calculations on the bill and I'm going to say, we're not flying teams to Perth when there's no home crowd support for the Fever.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I guess there would be a different answer, Luke, based on who it was that you were speaking to. So from a club perspective, the great value from clubs is the membership and the bums on seats. And I think we pretty much blatantly know that we're not, if the seasons come back, we won't have crowds. So the best case scenario would be to look at a season, but with no crowds. The flip side of that, when you number crunch, the numbers that we also need to make sure we consider in the crunching are the commercial numbers. And so, for example, Channel 9 is a partner along with Netball Australia, and all of those commercial contracts that are in place, those commercial contracts stand to gain better like netball as a whole by making sure that we have a week in, week out competition, more commercial opportunity, a longer period of branding. So if we go into that hub environment, there is the capacity to go to the hub and then roll the games out on a week-by-week basis, and nobody know what the results of those games are, and that's still a possibility. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we try and maintain the same amount of airtime that we would in a normal season. No matter what, we have to accept that everyone's going to take a financial hit irrespective of how the season pans out. And at the end of the day, as I've said, I don't care how it happens. I just hope it does. I want it to, but I'm still going to try and keep my fingers crossed that we can get a normal season in.
If you can get the normal season in then, Sue, can you see ramifications and how that would affect the international season? Because traditionally that's played after SSN or after the ANZ Premiership. It's usually a bit later in the year, isn't it? Like September, October.
Yeah, correct. And I know that there are dual discussions that are taking place. Yeah. Netball Australia currently talking with the 4 countries involved in the Quad Series, but also again with Netball New Zealand from a Constellation Cup perspective. I think realistically, we have to consider that maybe the Quad Series may not go ahead this year. But we do know already, as of today, the Warriors have been allowed to cross borders and come across for the NRL. So the Cabinet's made that decision today, which is just terrific news. So for me, it kind of sets a precedent that there is the ability for Australia and New Zealand to get a series in. And I feel if we can make a decision around Suncorp Super Netball and the ANZ Championship within the next, say towards the end of May, I feel like with confidence that will come with a possible international season heading in towards Christmas. I don't think it'll be a Quad Series. It may be an extended Constellation Cup, or it might just simply be a 1 or 2 game series of Australia v New Zealand. But fingers crossed that we can get at least something away.
Putting on your coaching cap for a moment, and let's say you're right for the sake of discussion, what does then the impact, say, of a 14-day quarantine on either side of the Tasman, or self-isolation, but basically quarantine, then have? Because it's pretty, you'd be lucky in some cases if either team was to spend 2 weeks.
Luke, you're just dropping out.
All right, start again. Putting on your coaching cap and assuming that the players have to go into isolation for 7 to 14 days, the rival either Australia or New Zealand internationals, what is that impact? Because it's a bit unusual to say the least.
I'm struggling. The message, I'm really struggling to hear, but are you talking about going into a hub and being away for 7 to 14 days? Is that? Self-isolation if you cross international borders. Right. Oh, look, I think I've got a feeling that, and this is a really tough one, but I've got a feeling that the governments of both our countries want elite sport back. And I feel like they're prepared to make decisions. So whether that is, and like I said, as a precedent today with the Warriors coming across and being able to play, I've got a feeling that by the time netball makes its decision, I don't think that quarantine or self-isolation will be a part of that decision. I've got a feeling that by the time we look at a international series, I don't think that's going to be an issue for either of our countries. And what you've got to remember is we're sitting in the very beginning of May and we're talking about a possible series in November or December for international. That's months and months and months away. If you have a look at how well we've progressed in 2 months, both in New Zealand and Australia, I'd like to think that we are vastly progressed by the time it hits November and December. And again, it won't be with crowds in a stadium, but I feel confident that we'll be able to move through borders and across to New Zealand or back in order to get our international season away.
And there's obviously still something else that has to happen with international stuff, Lisa. Sue, with the replacement for Lisa Alexander too. That's probably been held back because of the whole COVID thing as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, and obviously, I mean, the application process went out as it normally would in terms of time frame, but I'm not sure that the decision making will stick to the initial or original time frame. I saw yesterday the announcement of Stacey West into the high performance role. So now that that's in place, she'll play a big part in the process and part of that decision making for our next national coach. So again, it's a really difficult time, is it? If you were putting your hand in for that job, I guess you'd want to. It's a difficult predicament because I think we know that there'll be a number of coaches that apply for the position that are current Suncorp Super Netball coaches. And now that we're looking at a delayed season, maybe both domestically and internationally, can the new coach manage that? And I guess Netball Australia and the panel that makes the decision, along with the applicants, will have to take that into consideration. But yeah, it's an interesting time to be appointing a national coach.
And have you got any email for us, Sue? Or who do you believe are the strong contenders to get the job?
Yeah, look, again, I feel like Simone McInnes is, for me, the front runner, the current Melbourne Vixens coach. And I feel like she's ready to do the job. And I believe that whilst I know she dearly loves the Melbourne Vixens and still wants success again to have a premiership there, these opportunities for national coaches are far and few between. So sometimes you have to put your hand up, even though the timing might not be 100% perfect. And I also believe that Simone's the sort of person, the skills and traits that I think Simone will bring to the national coach job are skills that I think I felt maybe were a little bit lacking in the last couple of years with the Diamonds. I feel that she's got a bit of a hard nose about her, and I feel like our national program probably needs a little bit of tough love at the top. I also think that she's a very a strong game day coach. But I continue to say that if Simone gets the job, I challenge her around the team that she places around her. I think it's really, as I do any coach, I think I really do believe that a good coach, and I say Dame Nolene Tarua for me has been a prime example in the last 18 months. If you have a look at the calibre and variety of coach that she's placed around her in the last 18 months, that to me is exactly what our new national coach needs to consider.
I've got a sort of two-part question here. And again, Ben and I had the benefit of discussing this off there. But so for the first part, do you think then it's a matter of aligning Suncorp League coaches with the diamonds, in effect, for the lack of a better description. And the second part of the question is, and this is kind of tricky to allude to in a short space of time, but do you think the next coach of the Diamonds then needs to think more strategically because of the way international netball has gone in just the last 2 years? Because, as you know, we don't wait for the Australian New Zealand final at big events anymore. You know, I mean, at the World Cup, I was wondering, are we even going to get the Silverton's going to make the final? And that has been a sea change, I think, in my view.
I think, firstly, with regards to the caliber of coach maybe that sits alongside our new Diamonds coach, I just think that you need to cast the net wide. And I wouldn't be tunnelled or boxed into looking just at Suncorp Super Netball. I think what Simone probably needs, or Simone, I'm saying Simone like I feel like she's got the job, but I feel like what the national coach that steps in needs to do is really think about maybe where their weaknesses are, and then also where they can be challenged. And I don't think it hurts if the national coach that goes into the job doesn't continue with a Suncorp Super Netball team. I would highly encourage assistant coach roles to be those of Suncorp Super Netball coaches that are getting game day coaching. I think that's got to be the balance. And I really do. I feel like that was something that, and I'm talking week in, week out game day coaching, even though Lisa Alexander coached almost the same number of games as a Suncorp Super Netball coach. It's a different style at international level. So you can spend an entire year waiting for the moment just to coach. Whereas Suncorp Super Netball is going and going and going for 4.5 months. And then all of a sudden into an international season. So if the successful candidate is a Suncorp Super Netball coach and is negotiating a role that sees them being able to mould the two jobs, then cast the net wide. Look internationally. Look at ex-players that have been coaches. Look at Suncorp Super Netball. Just don't be narrow-minded when you select that role. And I think, Luke, any SSN coach that may apply for this position will definitely apply for the position and push the boundaries of flexibility around that role to begin with. As in, can I do both for some period of my contract?
And just a bit of a more lighthearted one here. Sue, aside from having a gas bag with various netball figures, what else have you been doing to fill up your time over there in the West?
Ben, I have been painting, I have been gardening, I have been cleaning, I have been cooking. I've been doing everything I never get time to do when life completely consumes you during a normal season. I got a bike and I've been riding, I've been walking. I've actually enjoyed a good portion of this break. I felt like, for the last 3 or so years, I've been so busy. And just prior to Christmas, I remember saying to my family and a few friends, gee, I'd love a break, but I didn't mean a pandemic. So it's nice to, it's been nice to have some time at home. Our weather in Perth has been beautiful. But I must admit, I am getting to the end. I'm now starting to have every 2 or 3 days, I start to go, come on, let's go. I want to get life back to normal. So I'm getting to the end of my tether.
I saw, though, over there in Perth, it looks like it's one of the first states, WA, to start to relax restrictions a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So as of Monday this week, we're entitled to have up to 10 people outside, still with social distancing measures in place, but we can go to the park and have a picnic, or we can go to the netball courts and have up to 10 people there, but everyone has to use their own equipment. It's certainly going to make a big difference, particularly for people that work, say, for, outdoor activities like personal training and things like that. Those groups can come back, yoga, all those sorts of things. So that sort of, I guess, that healthy aspect of life has started to come back into Perth, which I think from people's mental health has been terrific. So I think they're going to review that in 3 weeks' time. And also our schools went back this week as well. All schools went back this week. So, yeah, it's West Australia certainly leading the way at the moment with regards to some of these loosening of I guess, the restrictions.
On a light-hearted note, does that open the door to fast five taking off? Because 5 players in each team, if you can skip the umpire.
Yeah. So it's why not? You know, when I was actually talking with someone about this today. Yeah, quite possibly. I think you've got to do what you've got to do at the moment. So, and there's nothing to say that, you know, if there's more than 10 of you in a team, you know, you can still work it where you could have, say, you know, 6 or 8 of you down one end and 6 or 8 down the other, providing you're following social distancing rules. So I think everyone's trying to exercise to the best of their ability the ways to manage the new regulations. And, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see, I mean, at the moment, there's supposed to be no contact. So I guess that rules that out to a certain degree. But I think that'll be the next step, Luke, and I wouldn't be surprised to see, you know, people out there playing their half courts right up until we get the green light to resume.
And back on a more serious note, Sue, the current situation, what are you hearing in terms of how it's affecting the levels below Suncorp Super Netball and ANZ Premiership? So stuff like state leagues, ANL, and even to probably more of an extent, community netball.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, I actually think they're going to be they're okay. I wouldn't be surprised to see that back before SSN. So I think community netball will probably be one of the first things that comes back. It will be in a more modified, you know, you're not going to have thousands of people down at your netball courts on a Saturday. But I do think in some capacity netball will, at a community level, will start back sooner rather than later. And I also believe that our state leagues are likely to start back, because whilst there are no border restrictions involved for a state league program, they're the ones that can get up and moving. So I feel like we're a couple of steps away from that with regards to the governments, and in here, particularly here in Western Australia, our Premier being able to just loosen the rules a little bit more. But I feel like the green light will go for community and state league well before it will go for Suncorp and ANL.
And I'll just clarify one thing if you can, and I'll explain in a moment. Is the ANL still scheduled to restart at some point, postponed, or has it been cancelled like the Beco League in New Zealand?
At this stage, there's been no decision made on ANL. I think they're really keen to try and get something in play, but it's still on the table for discussion.
I ask that because potentially, if you can get an ANL season in, it puts Australian players a year ahead of their Kiwi counterparts on the development cycle, and that could prove quite crucial when it gets to the Commonwealth Games or even the next World Cup.
Well, yeah, Luke, and even World Youth next year, I think that's probably the biggest, and that's probably one of the decisions Netball Australia's keen to take into consideration. I think that's why they have yet not made a decision about ANL and said no, because we do have a World Youth Cup next year, and predominantly that's where a lot of our depth for that comes. Of course, there will be a percentage of players playing Suncorp Super Netball that are still eligible for World Youth next year, but ultimately our Australian Netball League holds the group of athletes that are likely to go forward. So I think Netball Australia is pretty keen to, see if it can get an ANL season underway. But at the end of the day, mate, they could end up like the Beco League cancelling it, and then we're all on a level playing field.
No worries. Thanks very much for that, Sue. Good to have a chat, and hope everything goes okay over there in the West with the restrictions being loosened, and good to have a chat with you as always.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Luke. Good to see you boys back again.
Yes,
even though we're not properly back, but good to have you back.
Yes. Thanks very much. Keep up the good work with Gaudy's Gas Bags.
Thanks, boys.
Thank you. Cheers.